The Supreme Court could soon issue a decision on its first major Second Amendment case in years.
It's so overwhelming, no lawful citizen would be able to comply if this passes. Nobody.
D.C.'s Court of Appeals rules the district's ban on some firearm magazines violates the Second Amendment.
Court has declined to answer the question, well, what about the part of the Second Amendment that says keep and bear arms? What about guns in public?
Gun laws and how they differ state to state came into focus at a time like this.
The Supreme Court just changed everything for gun owners. A single decision just came down from the highest court in the land, and it has effectively rewritten the rulebook for more than 65 million gun owners across every single state. Most of them have no idea it happened. Some of them are going to find out the hard way, in handcuffs on the side of a highway, or standing in a courtroom wondering how everything went sideways so fast. That does not need to be you, and it will not be, because by the time we get through this together, you are going to understand this ruling better than 99% of gun owners in America. You are going to know exactly what changed, who it affects, which everyday habits could now land someone in serious legal trouble, and what specific steps you need to take starting today to make sure you are on the right side of this. So let us start with the backstory, because this did not appear out of thin air. This has been building for years. For decades, gun laws in America have been a tangled, contradictory patchwork. Every state essentially did its own thing. You had states where carrying a firearm was as routine as carrying a wallet. Then you had states where simply owning certain types of firearms came with a mountain of paperwork, fees, waiting periods, and legal exposure. Gun owners who traveled for work, who moved across state lines, who just wanted to take a family road trip, constantly had to navigate this web of conflicting regulations. It was messy, it was confusing, and honestly, the courts let it stay that way for a very long time. But behind the scenes, something was shifting. Over the past several years, gun rights organizations across the country started filing aggressive legal challenges against state-level restrictions they believed had gone too far. And the Supreme Court, whose composition has evolved significantly over recent terms, began signaling a willingness to re-examine how firearms laws are evaluated. That led to a series of landmark moments, the most important of which was the Bruen decision in 2022. Bruen fundamentally changed the legal standard for evaluating gun laws. Before that ruling, courts used what is called a balancing test. They would weigh the government's stated interest in public safety against the individual's Second Amendment rights and make a judgment call. After Bruen, the rules changed completely. The government now has to prove that any firearm restriction it wants to enforce is consistent with the historical tradition of firearm regulation dating back to the founding of this country. We are talking about the 1700s and 1800s. If there is no historical analog for the restriction, it is constitutionally suspect. That was an earthquake in legal circles, and what has just happened builds directly on that foundation and takes it even further. The Supreme Court's latest action has sent a clear and unmistakable message to state legislatures across the country. The old playbook for writing gun laws is done. States that had imposed sweeping bans on certain firearm features, broad restrictions on where and how people could carry, and blanket prohibitions that stripped rights from entire categories of people are now staring down serious constitutional challenges. And this affects every gun owner in the country, whether you live in a state with relaxed laws or one with the strictest regulations on the books. Whether you carry every day or simply keep a firearm at home for protection, this ruling touches your life. Before we go deeper into the details, drop your state in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you are watching from and how this is landing in your area, because the impact of this ruling varies depending on where you live, and your comment might help someone else in your state who is trying to figure out what this means for them. Now let us break down the actual substance of what the court decided, because the legal filings are dense and deliberately complicated. Here it is in plain language. The court essentially ruled that blanket prohibitions on entire classes of commonly owned firearms or accessories cannot survive constitutional scrutiny unless the government can demonstrate a clear historical parallel from the founding era. What that means in simple terms is this: if millions of Americans already own it, the government faces an enormous legal hurdle in trying to ban it. That is a profound shift. It takes the burden off the individual and places it squarely on the government to justify the restriction. But the ruling went further than just firearms themselves. It also addressed the issue of who can be restricted from ownership. There have been laws on the books in numerous states that removed gun rights from people who were never convicted of a violent crime, people with decades-old nonviolent felonies, people flagged through civil proceedings like restraining orders that were later dismissed. The court stated plainly that these kinds of broad, sweeping disqualifications are constitutionally suspect under the historical test established in Bruen. For anyone who was previously told they could not own a firearm because of a nonviolent legal matter in their past, this ruling may open the door to revisiting that determination with an attorney. The court also pushed back hard against something legal experts call sensitive place designations. Several states, New York and New Jersey being the most notable, had used this concept incredibly broadly. They designated so many locations as sensitive places that carrying a firearm almost anywhere in public became effectively impossible. The court drew a clear line. Restricting firearms in a courthouse or a school is one thing. Declaring that virtually every building in every city in a state is a sensitive place is something entirely different, and the court has made clear it will no longer tolerate that approach. There is also a significant component dealing with permit requirements. Several states require permits just to purchase a handgun, layered on top of the federal background check that already exists. The court's reasoning in this ruling puts enormous pressure on those multi-layered approval systems because the historical record simply does not support requiring citizens to navigate 5 different government checkpoints before exercising a constitutional right. Those systems may be on borrowed time. And then there is the magazine capacity issue, which affects millions of gun owners directly. Several states have banned magazines holding more than a certain number of rounds. The court's historical test essentially dismantles the legal foundation of those bans because there is no founding era equivalent to a magazine capacity restriction. Legal challenges are already underway in multiple states, and some of those bans are expected to fall. Now let us talk about what this actually looks like for real people, because laws written on paper are one thing. Real life is something else entirely. Think about a 45-year-old truck driver named Marcus who runs routes through 5 different states every week. He has a concealed carry permit from his home state, but 2 of the states on his route have had extremely restrictive carry laws. Every single day, Marcus has had to weigh his personal safety on long, isolated highway stretches against the risk of a felony charge if he crosses the wrong state line while carrying. This ruling is directly challenging the restrictions in those states, and Marcus is watching every development closely because his daily safety depends on it. Then there is Sarah, a single mother living in a rural area where police response times can exceed 30 minutes. She is not what anyone would call a gun enthusiast. She is simply a woman who lives alone with 2 kids and purchased a semi-automatic rifle 5 years ago for home defense. She bought it legally. Everything was above board. Then her state passed a ban, and suddenly she was told the firearm she legally purchased was now prohibited, and she had to surrender it or face criminal charges. This ruling reopens that fight for Sarah and for thousands of people in her exact situation who did everything right and were punished after the fact by changing laws. And there is James, a retired veteran who served 20 years with an impeccable record. A decade ago, during a difficult divorce, he was subject to a civil restraining order that was later dismissed entirely. No criminal conviction, no violence, nothing proven in court. But that old dismissed order has followed him through the system, flagging him and restricting his ability to purchase a new firearm ever since. The court's new framework directly challenges whether a civil record like that, one that was never upheld in a criminal proceeding, can permanently strip someone of a constitutional right. For James, this is about more than a firearm. It is about dignity, recognition of his service, and his standing as a citizen. Somewhere out there, a gun owner who has never heard any of what we just covered is about to get stopped in the wrong state, carry the wrong magazine, or surrender a firearm they were never legally required to give up. Share this video with one person who needs to hear it. Just one. That single share could keep someone out of a courtroom. Now we need to address the myths and the misinformation, because some of the bad information circulating can genuinely get someone arrested or cost them their rights permanently. A lot of people are hearing about this ruling and concluding that all gun laws everywhere are basically void and they can do whatever they want. That is completely wrong, and it is an incredibly dangerous assumption. This ruling does not erase all gun laws. It establishes a new legal test that laws must pass. Until a specific law in your specific state is challenged in court and formally struck down by a judge, it remains fully enforceable. Treating a law as gone before a court says so can result in arrest, prosecution, and conviction. Do not assume. Verify. One of the biggest mistakes people are making is believing that a concealed carry permit from their home state now works everywhere because of these rulings. That is not how reciprocity works, and this ruling did not create a national carry permit. Every state still controls whether it recognizes permits from other states. Some do, many do not. If you cross a state line carrying a firearm without confirming that the state you are entering recognizes your permit, you are taking a very real legal risk no matter what the Supreme Court has said. Here's another critical point that could save someone from a jail cell. Many gun owners have heard that certain accessory bans and magazine restrictions are being legally challenged, and they have jumped to the conclusion that those items are now legal to possess everywhere. They are not. A legal challenge being filed is not the same thing as a law being struck down. Until a federal court issues an injunction or a final ruling specifically addressing the law in your state, that law remains in full effect and is fully enforceable. People have been arrested and prosecuted for possessing items that were actively being challenged in court at the very moment they were arrested. The challenge does not protect you. Only the final ruling does. So here is exactly what you should do starting today. First, look up the specific gun laws in your state, search for your state name plus current firearm laws 2025 and actually read through them. Write down the rules regarding carry permits, magazine limits, and banned features. Most gun owners have never actually done this, and that ignorance is a liability. Second, if you ever carry a firearm across state lines for any reason, use a reliable reciprocity resource like the USCCA Reciprocity Map. Check every single state you will pass through. Do not guess. Do not rely on what a friend told you. Verify it yourself. Third, if you have an old civil legal issue in your history, a dismissed restraining order, a nonviolent conviction from years ago, contact a gun rights attorney in your state and ask them to review your specific situation under this new legal framework. Many of them offer free initial consultations. And fourth, if a law enforcement officer ever asks whether you are carrying a firearm, stay calm and say these words: "Yes, officer, I have a legally owned firearm and I have my permit. How would you like me to proceed?" Do not reach for anything. Do not launch into a legal lecture. Do not argue about Supreme Court rulings on the side of the road. Stay calm. Let them lead. Protect yourself by being smart, not confrontational. Here is what you need to remember from everything we covered today. The Supreme Court has established a historical test that all firearm laws must now satisfy. Bans on commonly owned firearms, accessories, and magazine capacities are facing serious legal challenges across multiple states. Restrictions based on nonviolent or civil legal histories are being reconsidered under this new framework. Sensitive place designations that effectively banned carry in almost all public spaces have been challenged, and many are expected to collapse. But no existing state law disappears automatically because of this ruling. You must follow your state's laws until a court specifically strikes them down. Your rights mean absolutely nothing if you do not understand them, and they can be taken from you faster than you think if you fail to protect them with knowledge. If this helped you understand something nobody else had explained clearly, subscribe so you never miss an update like this one. Drop your state in the comments along with your thoughts on this ruling, because your perspective matters and it helps others in the same situation. And send this to one gun owner in your life who needs to hear it today. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.